Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Today we have a very special show with two excellent educators, members of the New Mexico House of Representatives. We have Stephanie Garcia Richard. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lorene.
Democrat from Los Alamos, Santa Fe, Sandoval, and Rio Arriba.
And
right?
Santa Fe, yes.
Yeah. And we have Representative Dennis Roch, a Republican from District 67. It's 7 counties.
It is 7 counties.
Can you...
This goes from Colfax, Curry, Harding, Quay, Roosevelt, San Miguel, and Union counties, from Raton all the way down into Portales.
That's a really big district.
It is.
Yes.
I represent more cows than people, so.
Well, we've got some smart cows in
Yes,
the
indeed.
district, I can say that. We're taping partway through the session, so things are still in flux. But I've really invited you to speak about the state of education in New Mexico right now and what changes are coming about in the session. I want to talk a little. You're chair of the House Education Committee, and what is your background what professionally?
So I'm actually an educator by profession. I was a longtime classroom teacher, primarily for elementary and K-6 grades. But after being elected, I did try one term in the classroom, and it was quite difficult on me and on the students both. So I'm now a quasi-administrator. I'm the curriculum coordinator for Powahka schools.
Ah, excellent. And Representative Roch, you were also, tell us your educational background.
Well, I started as a teacher. I spent almost 9 years teaching English and math in the secondary setting, middle school and high school. I also coached a bit, and then I went into administration, and I served as a principal. I've been athletic director and assistant superintendent, and now I'm superintendent of schools in Logan, New Mexico, and I'm in my 4th year there.
Ah, good. Well, you're the chair of the Education Committee, you're a member of the Education Committee, so tell us what the major issues are. Who wants to start? What is the state of education in New Mexico right
Sure.
now?
So
Ladies
thank
first.
you.
Okay.
And actually, Lorene, if we can just remind your viewers that this is the former chair of the
Exactly.
Legislative Education Study Committee. So we were under this very adept chairmanship for 2 years
Thank
in
you.
our interim. And a lot of the topics that we're going to be looking at during the session actually came up during the interim. And so one of the things that we really are looking at is the New Mexico Teach. That's our teacher evaluation system that's been promulgated in rule by the Public Education Department. And so we hear from a number of educators around the state and their experiences with this particular system, and so we'd like to take a look at possibly making some tweaks and changes to it.
We spent quite a bit of time over the last 2 years during the interim looking at the teacher evaluation system, making sure members understood how the system works, how teachers are observed, how student achievement measures are calculated. And so a lot of the bills that you're seeing introduced this year are around that system, because now members feel like we have an opportunity to revisit it and find out if it's exactly how we want it to be.
Well, there's some other issues underneath the teacher evaluations that have come up a lot. One is the issue of what percentage of the results of the student's scores should affect that teacher. And also, isn't there an element of attendance issues?
That's correct.
Would one of you speak to that?
Actually, I'll let Representative Roch do that since he has a bill to address that very issue.
So Representative Jason Harper from Rio Rancho, he and I are co-sponsoring a bill to basically prohibit teacher attendance from being used as a negative measure for a teacher's evaluation, under the idea that, hey, teachers are human too. I mean, my own wife is a classroom teacher. We have 3 kids at home, and so if I'm up here in Santa Fe and one of our kids is sick, she has to be home with the kid. And so she's missing school, and it could negatively impact her evaluation. So we said, if they're using the leave that is granted to them under their contract in the local board policy, they ought to be allowed to use it and not be penalized for it.
And there are public health issues, too. You don't want a sick person coming in,
Absolutely.
shaking every hand of every child, and yes.
All right, so we're dealing, in an environment where there are children, and we don't want to be, contagious in that environment. But I just really want to emphasize to you and your viewers that this idea was sort of born of the field a little bit.
It was.
I know that Representative Harper, when he talks about the bill, he talks about talking with teachers in his district, and that sort of was a complaint that rose to the top that, why should, teachers are people. I mean, we are employees just like any other folks. Why should we be penalized for taking time, either personal or sick leave? Either?
And teachers in my district where I work, the ones I see every day in and out of the building, they indicated to me that, we don't get penalized when we use our health insurance that's provided under our contract, or penalized if we ultimately retire and use our educational retirement system. Why would we be penalized for using this benefit in a different way?
And how do you feel about, I think it's just this session, moving from 50% of the teacher's evaluation are how well their own students did, to now 40%. But how do you feel about that whole issue of, should a teacher be graded on, maybe the kid is afraid of taking tests, on the test, how much should test results affect a teacher's evaluation?
So this is where I think we could get into a little bit of a more of a discussion. So just backing up a little ways, we understand that we need a measure of accountability. We need a way to identify who our quality teachers are, what practices they are doing in order to make them quality, and to support our more struggling teachers. So the teacher evaluation system, I think as a whole, just in terms of the basis for it, I think we agree upon.
I think conceptually she's exactly right. For a long time, the teacher evaluation system in New Mexico was completely subjective. It was all based on how your principal viewed you doing, what kind of job you did in the classroom. And if your principal liked you, regardless of the job you did, you might get glowing remarks. And if they didn't like you for some reason, and even if you did well, you could be marked down. So we said, well, there probably ought to be some balance between subjective measures, observation, and objective measures, how well the students did over time, how well they're growing in their content and their competency. And so now what we're just trying to do is right size it and find out what's the right mix. 50% objective measures, I don't know, maybe that's too high. There are some that would say 0 is what they really need. I think the number will clearly fall somewhere in that range, and it remains to be seen what the final result will look like.
Well, we'll leave that one there because there's so much else to talk about. Charter schools is another issue that's just bubbling up all over the session.
So this is actually another matter that we undertook during the interim. Mm-hmm. In fact, 2 interims ago, we had a charter school subcommittee with some recommendations to the full committee for endorsed legislation. I don't know that any of those bills survived.
Well, some of them are actually still being considered even this session.
They've been revived.
That's right. They've been revised and they've been sort of brought back. And, well, what about this? And we've taken more input. There was a bill offered last year that did not make it through. And after additional conversations with charter advocates and others, there's a new version of the bill that actually has some improvements. And it was just heard in Senate Education Committee recently, and it's moving on to its next committee, and it's Senate Bill 30, and I think it may have some legs before it's all over.
So yes.
Let me just, it's very important. One of our missions is to educate people, and there may be some members of our audience who don't understand the difference between a regular public school and a charter school, in just a sentence or two.
Absolutely. So charter schools are actually public schools. Mm-hmm. However, they are independently created through a chartering system. They have what we call an authorizer. So either the local school board or the Public Education Commission decides that they can indeed become a school and begin and operate as a school. Mm-hmm. But they are public schools. I mean, they receive state funding. They have to accept all students. They have to be open enrollment. Some charters, for example, the one here in Santa Fe, the New Mexico School for the Arts, they actually have their admissions on a lottery system. But I think in general, most charters just have an open enrollment like any kind of public school.
Thank you.
So, and just for your viewers as well, there are 89 traditional public school districts, and I believe about 100 charter schools. And I just heard today it's about 65 state charter schools, and the rest are locally chartered.
And some charters are just designed to provide a choice for parents and families. They may not be happy with their local public school for whatever reason, and so they go to find another option. But some of the charter schools are designed around a certain mission. Maybe they want to prepare students for careers in the media arts, like we're doing here today with an interview. Or maybe they want to do something around healthcare fields or construction and engineering. Those are all public charter schools that exist in New Mexico right now. And so it's very fascinating, the options available to families.
So, Lorene, I just wanted to emphasize, that our legislative approach to charter schools is not about, eliminating charter schools in our process. I think they serve a purpose. I, in fact, myself taught at 2 charter schools, one here in the state, Cariño's Charter School, and then one in California. This legislation is more about equity in funding. What we found, I think, when the Charter School Act was passed, is maybe there was some unintended consequences of considering charter schools as school districts, making them eligible for funding that districts actually are eligible for. And so this type of legislation, and the representative could talk in more detail, but I think we are not out to destroy or demonize charter schools.
I think right-sizing is probably the best way to put it, and part of the concern has come from superintendents and school boards around the state who look at the $215 million of new education funding we've spent since 2008, half of which has gone to charter schools.
Which educate which percentage of our students?
7%. So charter schools educate roughly 7% of the student population, but have taken half of the new money since 2008. And it's a question of is this intended, or was this sort of an accident of the formula? Do we need to revisit the formula? Are there monies flowing that we don't intend to flow in this direction? We want to make sure that good charter schools, and there are many, continue their work and maybe have the opportunity to expand or grow their enrollment. But there are a couple of bad actors as well that have given some of the charter movement a bad name. And we may have some provisions that we're considering now that would automatically close them if they underperform what they say they're going to do.
Well, let's just expand this to the whole status of K through 12 funding.
Okay.
So where do things stand now? And also, everyone knows the state is broke, and there's a lot of solutions or modifications that have to be made. But there are, there was a bill to shorten the school day, maybe shorten the school year. How are we doing for funds, and why do so many times the cuts seem to fall on our kids?
So we're not doing well for funds. We rely on an industry that has a lot of boom and bust. The extractive industry, it goes with the market of where oil is produced and purchased. And so we find ourselves in these rough economic times. And unfortunately, schools are, 48%, K-12 by itself, not even including higher ed, is 48% of our state's budget, $2.6 billion.
That's correct.
And so that is why it seems to folks to be a very evident place to look for money-saving measures. Unfortunately, what our schools have experienced now is 2 cuts within the same fiscal year. So looking forward to any funding measures that we do for the coming fiscal year, the FY18 fiscal year, we need to really understand that schools are already coming from this place of deficit. There are a number of measures, and again, we can get into a discussion about this, Representative, to talk about perhaps using some of the money that is used in the programs that the Public Education Department administers and moving those monies directly into school districts.
That seems to me to make more sense than to take the cash balances that each school has, because doesn't that affect payroll in September?
Yes.
It certainly does. And cash balances actually play a very important role. As a school superintendent, I can tell you that when a school is trying to serve its special needs students, and those students are supported by federal special education dollars, the school district has to spend its own money on those programs and then ask for reimbursement from the federal funds. And those reimbursements can take some time, up to 6 months, in fact, sometimes. Likewise, if schools are spending money on Title I programs for low-income students, or running summer payroll, or doing building repairs and waiting for reimbursements. And so as a result, if schools don't have a cash balance, they literally have their hands tied to the ability to serve the most needy students.
Well, we're speaking today with 2 gifted educators and lawmakers, Representative Dennis Roch, a Republican from Logan, and Representative Stephanie Garcia Richard, Democrat from the Los Alamos, Santa Fe, Rio Arriba.
Jemez Mountain Range.
Jemez Mountain Range. So we are addressing some of the burning issues in education in New Mexico, and you've addressed some very important things, but I'm going to just expand our focus a little bit. Where is the leadership now? I mean, who is leading the charge? Who is representing? The kids really are, in a way, voiceless in this, and that there's the teachers and there's the administration, and all against this backdrop of, hair on fire, there's no money. Where is the leadership? Who's thinking of new solutions? Are there new solutions?
So I unfortunately no longer sit on the House Appropriations Committee, but I believe that some of the leadership would probably come out of that committee. I know that they have a subcommittee that they look at only public ed K-12 education spending at once. And so there's a subcommittee that's only on that topic itself. I would agree with you that the kids are voiceless, but I would say that have been a certain number of proposed measures that, I think are just off the table. So there was an original proposal to take $120 million from school cash balances. We opted as a legislature not to go to that extent. There's another measure to require a 3.5% retirement swap for teachers. So I think that some of these measures, I don't know that they have necessarily have full support from the legislature.
And I would go one step further and say I sort of challenge the premise of the question a little bit, with all due respect to you, Lorraine. The idea that we don't have any money, and I keep hearing the state's broke. I remind my constituents, we're going to build a budget this year that's about $5.8 billion with a B. That's an awful lot of money that we're going to spend as a state.
Very good.
And I think that the question that I always remind folks is, if you want to find out someone's priorities, you look at their checkbook.
Exactly.
What do they spend their money on? That reveals a lot about what they care about. And if we as a state are choosing to cut education, instead of some things that are maybe nice to have but are not need to have essential functions of government, then we are the ones that are at fault. And so there have been proposals in the House, at least, to say, let's forego capital outlay and use $62 million this year that we would instead get for a little bit of pork, pet projects in our districts. Let's forego that and save the schools from getting cut $50 million. And that decision was killed. And folks said, no, we want to take it from public education instead. And that just drives me crazy as an educator. And I think Representative Garcia Richard would agree the money could be better spent in schools. But those are political decisions, and sometimes that's the cost of leadership.
Well, speaking of costs, Lucky Varela, who was head of House Appropriations, he's always been my go-to person for financial issues in the state. I trust him always to have the state's best issues, the best interests at issue. But he finally said about the whole issue of revenue enhancement, he said, if you're going to keep milking this cow, you're going to have to feed it at some point.
Right.
And so... so that's a bigger picture. That's not necessarily education, but education does get hit when there are no other new monies coming in. Speaking of drowning, in red ink, and you were featured in an article, Representative Roch, called "Drowning in Data," and it was in the Santa Fe Reporter, and I had no idea till I read that the amount of record keeping that you all have to do, as if it was enough teaching and preparing and administering. But then how much time do you spend on data shepherding?
We do a significant amount at the school level of sending reports in to Santa Fe, to the feds, to U.S. Department of Ed requires reports as well. And those reports, sometimes they're demographic in nature, who are the students that you're serving, what are their special ed needs, their economically disadvantaged needs, what courses are they taking, are their teachers licensed? There's lots and lots of data. We actually have 4 firm reporting dates in law that we have to send that data up to Santa Fe electronically. And then one of the things that the article revealed, sometimes the agency bureaus within the public education department don't even talk to each other about the data that they're asking us for. And it's been a little frustrating from a school perspective. So,
do you have thoughts on data?
I just remember the quote from the article, data rich and information poor.
That's right.
I mean, we collect data for a reason. Are we using it for that purpose or not?
Well, and I always make the analogy of if you go to your doctor and you're feeling a little sick and they order tests, and then the test results come back and the doctor never looks at the test results, they don't know how to diagnose you, nor to how to treat your ailment. And so when we have all this data, we've got to use it as the basis for decision making that may improve our educational program.
Yeah. You are carrying, in addition to your dedication to education, you are carrying some other bills, and you are co-sponsoring with some other people, HB 241. We've kind of talked about that. Is there anything else you want to add? It's a use of attendance in teacher evaluations.
Or disallowing the use of attendance.
Yes, right, yeah. Do you have any more thoughts on that, or should we move to some of your other ones?
Well, I think we've talked about the need to make sure that teachers are treated as professionals. They're granted these days under their contract, and they need to have the ability to use them. Although we also recognize that using attendance in the evaluation system, at least over the last few years, has significantly improved the time that teachers are in the classroom. So how do we reconcile wanting to have a teacher in front of the classroom and not a sub, and yet recognizing teachers are human too? And that's the difficult struggle that we have as we move this bill through the process.
You also had a House Joint Resolution.
I do. House Joint Resolution 5 is one I've co-sponsored with Senator Daniel Ivey Soto from Albuquerque. And what it would do is, right now, the Constitution of New Mexico prohibits unfunded mandates on cities and counties. This would include public schools. And it would basically say no additional requirement can come down from the state unless the funding comes with it to pay for that program.
So can you give some examples?
Oh my goodness. So we talked about the reporting requirements, and those are numerous. And you also have teachers right now move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 in their licensure. That requires a statutory minimum salary hike. But the district or the school isn't always compensated for that salary increase. So if the school budget can afford it, they pay it. If it can't afford it, they still have to pay it. And so there's an unfunded mandate that makes balancing the books a little tricky at the school level.
Yeah.
And so, Lorene, this bill, HJR 5, is actually going to be heard in the Education Committee on February 8th, 2017, tomorrow. So depending on when this is aired,
This won't air till the weekend.
when folks see
yeah.
it, it's actually archived.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. They can go to www.nmledges.gov
That's right.
and go and look at which committee?
The House Education Committee.
House Education Committee. It's all there. You never will miss a thing. But you have another education bill too?
Yes, so my bill also deals with teacher evaluations, and this actually came to me from my district, from the Los Alamos School District, who has a lot of opinions, both the administrators and the teachers, and parents, in fact, on our current teacher evaluation system. They would like the opportunity to maybe pilot a new system where they would include student achievement scores. They would include some of these measures that we're already using in NM Teach, but also talk about some other measures that we've seen really impact teacher quality, whether or not teachers collaborate, the quality of the professional development that they get. And so they would like an opportunity to pilot their own teacher evaluation system, and so that's what my bill does. It's House Bill 158.
Good. And now you both have tippy-toed a little into some election things. You have I must admit, I really like this bill, HB 290, online application for absentee ballots. Why shouldn't it be that easy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you can actually register to vote or change your voter registration online right now. But if you want to request an absentee ballot, you actually have to do it in person, or you have to mail in a hard copy. So this would just allow the option for folks to request an absentee ballot be sent to them via an online application. It's about convenience to the voters. We want people to participate in their elections. We're going to have to give them the tools to do that.
And just to be clear, you're not voting online.
That's correct. It would not be an online vote. You would actually request the ballot be sent to you via an online application, and then once it comes, then you mail it back in. Now, that's not my bill. I've co-sponsored the bill, but I'm really hoping that it can move through this process.
And you, with the esteemed Representative Jim Dines, have this the unaffiliated voters in the primary.
Yes.
Talk a little about that.
So what we found in actually the most recent presidential election is that young people, especially aged 18 to 35, are increasingly registering to vote, but not choosing to affiliate themselves with any of the major parties. We call that in our state decline to state, or unaffiliated. And those folks, unfortunately, are left out of primary elections because primary elections are closed elections only for the registered members of that party. What our bill does, it's very simple. It is not, a free-for-all jungle, open everything up primary. It allows folks who are unaffiliated on the day of election to come in and request one ballot, for either one of the two major parties.
On the day of the primary election.
Yes.
They can come in and choose one and then vote on that.
Correct.
Because the numbers are increasing of decline to state.
And actually, in my district, where we have the National Lab and folks are kind of nervous about their political affiliations being public, there's a larger number of these unaffiliated voters. So it means a lot to my constituents, but in fact, it's another access issue. allowing people to have access to elections that are, closed to them.
Yeah. So tell us, there's still another month or so of the session to go, if not more. Tell us what people should look for, and I'd like you to close with your wild animal bite bill. but give a heads up to people who are going to be watching. The session ends March 18th.
Well, there's certainly a lot of education bills, and we've spent the whole time today talking to you about them. But there are a number of bills across the legislature that touch on a variety of topics. Legalization of marijuana, for example, minimum wage increases.
You have the wild animal bite one. People love this.
Yes, this is brought to me by a constituent who was running in the Jemez Mountains in the trail run there, and found herself between a mother bear and her cubs. She was very much injured by the bear, and came to find that the bear had been destroyed, and was very upset by that, and kind of took a look into statute, took a look at what our state agencies do in terms of response to wild animals, and asked me to carry a bill to look at really a more comprehensive, measured approach to our relationship with wildlife, because we are, that's ever increasing in our world.
I'm really proud of your constituent, because she said, this bear did not attack me, going to eat a human. I was between her and her cubs. She did what any mother would do, and why should she be destroyed? So there are a lot of people following that. We've come to the end of our time. I'm so grateful to both of you. We've got much, much more to talk about. We'll do it again. But our guests today are Representative Dennis Roch, Republican from Logan, and Representative Stephanie Garcia Richard, Democrat from District
43 in Los Alamos.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much for what you do. We'll be watching all these bills carefully.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you.
And I'm Lorraine Mills. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.